They say K-9 handlers and their dogs retire together. But on his last night in uniform, Officer Harris realized some bonds don't just end. They warn you before they break. It started with a broken ritual. Rain tapped steadily on the windshield of the patrol car, drumming out the end of a career that had lasted more than 3 decades. Red and blue lights blinked gently across the wet pavement, casting a tired glow across a quiet industrial strip just outside Wilmington. Inside the squad car, Officer Ray Harris sat in silence, his stiff knees angled out, hands resting on a worn steering wheel like they had 1,000 nights before. His partner, Bandit, lay curled in the passenger seat, or at least he should have been asleep. Instead, the aging German shepherd shifted restlessly, head low, ears twitching every few seconds. His eyes weren't closed. They were fixed on something out there, in the dark. "You're not usually this jumpy, old man," Harris muttered, half smiling as he reached for the glove box. From inside, he pulled out a crinkled Ziploc bag. Their tradition, 1 peanut butter biscuit. One last call, one last shift. He held the treat out inches from Bandit's nose, but Bandit turned away. Didn't sniff, didn't lick, just gave a low, uneasy whine, the kind that bypasses your ears and tightens your gut. That's when Harris saw it. Bandit, ears high now, eyes fixed dead ahead, nose flaring as if he'd caught something on the wind. Even with the windows shut. "Talk to me, boy. What do you smell?" Harris sat up straighter. Bandit didn't answer. Not with sound. He moved like a machine switching on. No hesitation. He pawed the passenger door, nostrils twitching, then looked back at Harris like move. And Harris knew, better than to question a dog that had found everything from gunpowder to 2 missing toddlers in the past decade. He grabbed the flashlight, opened the door. The rain hit like spit from the sky. "All right, Bandit, show me." If stories like this grip your heart, don't forget to hit subscribe and follow the trail. The truth is just getting started. The scent trail led down a slope beside the tracks, slick with rain, lined with old chain-link fencing, and stinking of oil and rust. Bandit moved fast for a dog his age, his legs stiff but certain. His nose drove him like a compass. Harris followed close, boots sliding on the mud, flashlight beam bouncing across the darkness. Then Bandit stopped, not with a bark, with a stance, stiff, tail out, nose low. The flashlight beam cut across the wet gravel. There, on the edge of the rail line, was a man, a mess of torn fabric and collapsed limbs, shoes gone, skin pale, flecked with grime. His chest rose. Barely. "Damn," Harris muttered, kneeling fast. He reached for a pulse. It was there, faint and struggling. The man lay half on the track, one arm twisted underneath, the other sprawled out like he'd reached for something and given up. "Buddy, you picked the worst nap spot in Delaware," Harris said under his breath. Then he felt it, the rumble, low at first in his boots and his belly, then louder, closer. He looked up and saw the headlight. A freight train, barreling, no signs of stopping. Harris hooked both arms under the man's armpits and pulled. Nothing. Dead weight. Rain-soaked jacket. The man didn't budge. Bandit barked, loud and sharp once, then lunged forward and bit onto the collar of the man's coat. "Bandit, yes, pull." The old shepherd heaved backward, paws clawing at the mud. Harris gritted his teeth, legs shaking as the tracks began to hum like an angry god. Together, dog and man, they yanked, dragged. The instant they cleared the rails, the train exploded past them in a screaming blur of steel and thunder. Rain turned to mist in the wind it kicked up. Harris fell back on the gravel, gasping. Bandit stood over the unconscious man, chest heaving, eyes still locked on the tracks as if danger hadn't yet passed. That was when Harris saw something strange. The man's arms hadn't just been limp. They were behind his back. Harris rolled him slightly and his flashlight caught it. Black zip ties. Tight. Deep red welts in the skin. This wasn't some homeless guy drunk on the wrong side of the tracks. Someone had put him there. Harris cursed, quietly pulling out his radio, but Bandit's attention had shifted again. The shepherd was staring, not at the train, but at the man's coat. No, not the coat, at his pocket. Harris knelt, hands moving quickly, checking for weapons. Instead, the man stirred, just enough to twitch. Then his hand moved. Sluggishly, shakily, he pushed something out from his pocket into Harris's palm. A photo. Another Polaroid. Harris clicked the light toward it. His heart stopped. His wife. Smiling. Laughing. 2 decades younger, and standing beside a man Harris had never seen before, arm around her shoulder like they'd shared something no badge could protect. His fingers clenched, the rain poured, and somewhere inside him, something broke. Bandit didn't bark. He never barked when it was serious. He moved low, like a soldier on a mission. Ears pinned back, tail straight out. Harris had seen this posture 100 times in training drills and maybe 3 times in the field. This wasn't just alertness. This was purpose. And that's what scared him. Because Bandit had never been wrong. Harris stood there in the mud, raindrops tapping his uniform like impatient fingers, trying to catch his breath. He couldn't stop staring at the Polaroid in his hand, the one the man had pushed toward him with trembling fingers just moments before. His wife. That same half-smile she always had when she was about to say something sarcastic. That look in her eyes like she knew something you didn't. But it wasn't her expression that chilled him. It was the other man's arm slung around her shoulder. The stranger, confident, casual, like he belonged there. And Harris had no idea who he was. The wind shifted, blowing in a low moan through the chain-link fencing. It carried something with it. Not a scent Harris could smell, but one that Bandit clearly could. The dog snapped his head toward the embankment, then started moving again, following a new trail with the kind of urgency that said, "This isn't over." Harris stuffed the photo into his jacket and stood. "You found him once," he said softly. "Let's see what else they left behind." The tracks curved along an old industrial corridor, mostly warehouses now, half of them boarded up or converted to low-rent storage units. It used to be the heartbeat of the town's shipping industry. Now it was just a graveyard of forgotten deals and flickering sodium lights. Bandit led him down a narrow path along the edge of the fence, nose twitching hard, paws splashing through puddles. Every so often he'd pause and sniff, then keep going. His whole body was focused, tense, alive. And so was Harris. The adrenaline had leveled off, but the unease hadn't. Something about the way Bobby Sullivan had just appeared out of nowhere, 20 years after his face had been printed on milk cartons and tacked to the bulletin board at the old corner store. It didn't sit right. And that picture, that damn picture, Bandit stopped again. This time he didn't move forward. He turned his head slightly and looked back at Harris, waited, then took one step off the paved path and into the brush. Harris followed without hesitation. It was barely a trail, just a mess of wet vines and thorny shrubs cutting through the embankment down toward a loading dock. The rain had soaked the ground and Harris nearly lost his footing more than once, but Bandit pressed on. They came to a clearing behind one of the old brick warehouses. A busted security light flickered above a crooked steel door, casting long, erratic shadows. Bandit growled, low, barely audible. Then his nose snapped downward, and he started digging. "Whoa, easy," Harris said, crouching beside him. But Bandit wasn't guessing. He pawed hard at the dirt near the foundation until something metallic clinked beneath his claws. Harris cleared away some debris and found it, a small, rusted toolbox, half buried, like someone had hidden it in a hurry. He opened it. Inside was a mess of things that didn't belong together: a pocket knife, a stained roll of duct tape, a lighter with an oil company logo, and another Polaroid. This one was folded in half. Harris opened it carefully, the same man from the other photo, but this time alone. No smile, no wife, just a blank stare, written on the bottom in faded black ink. He made her laugh. I made her disappear. Harris felt like the air had been sucked out of his lungs. This was no accident, no vagrant collapse on a rail line. Somebody had dumped Bobby Sullivan there as a message. And whatever that message was, it had his wife's face all over it. Bandit stood guard beside him, eyes still watching the shadows. "You and me," Harris whispered. "We're not done tonight." He pulled out his phone and called it in. "Dispatch, this is Unit 43. A voice crackled through the line. "Go ahead, 43. I need backup to Warehouse 19 off Granger Street. Got a potential cold case opening up." "A what?" Harris looked at Bandit. "Just send somebody who remembers what this town used to be." He hung up. The toolbox sat open beside him, the picture trembling in his hand as the wind picked up. And somewhere, in the back of his mind, Harris could hear the echo of his wife's laughter. But this time, it didn't feel like a memory. It felt like a warning. The rain hadn't let up. It came down in cold sheets now, slicing through the beams of Harris's flashlight as he and Bandit made their way back up the embankment. The rusted toolbox was sealed again and tucked under Harris's arm, heavy with secrets. And something more. Intent. Whoever left it knew someone would find it, and they wanted that. Bandit moved slower now, not because he was tired, but because he was scanning, always scanning. His nose swept the air. His ears twitched. He was tracking something invisible to Harris, something still hanging in the air like gun smoke after the shot. They reached the top of the slope where the tracks ran, straight and silent under the weight of night. Harris paused, letting Bandit lead. The shepherd hesitated, then turned east, back toward where they'd found Bobby. But this time, Bandit didn't veer toward the rails. He went past them, across the tracks, into the tree line. The terrain changed, fast, gravel to grass, then to wet leaves and tangled underbrush. A forgotten strip of wood sandwiched between rail lines and a chain of old freight depots. Harris wouldn't have known it existed if he hadn't followed a dog through it. Bandit ducked low, sniffing a narrow path that wound around a half-fallen oak and into what looked like a drainage gully. There was graffiti on the concrete retaining walls, old tags, layers of color faded by sun and weather. Harris slipped once, catching himself on a slick root. "Careful," he muttered, mostly to himself. Bandit had stopped up ahead. He was frozen, body tight, nose down. Then he gave a short, sharp bark. Not a warning, not a signal for danger. A discovery. Harris caught up, breath fogging in the wet air, and shined his flashlight down. At first he thought it was just garbage, a pile of soaked fabric, maybe an old tarp or blanket tossed by someone who used to sleep rough out here. But then he saw the hand. Pale. Still. Bent awkwardly beneath the weight of a shoulder that no longer held tension. "Jesus," Harris whispered. He crouched fast, reaching out to check for a pulse, though he already knew, cold, rigid, too late. The body was male, maybe mid-30s, wearing jeans and a hoodie zipped halfway up over a dark t-shirt. The shoes were new, too new for someone living out here. There was no wallet, no phone. But what caught Harris's eye was the glint of silver poking from the jacket pocket. He reached in and pulled it free. A badge. Private Security, McKinley Freight Services. His stomach turned. That company used to lease out half the warehouses on Granger. His wife had done contract work for them, admin stuff, filing, accounting. She'd hated it, always complained about how shady the operation felt, how nobody lasted more than a few months, and now this man, whoever he was dead in the woods behind one of their buildings. Bandit let out a soft whine, sniffing the edges of the body, then stepping back. It was then that Harris noticed something else. The dead man's left wrist, wrapped in the same type of black zip tie that Bobby had been bound with. Only this one was cut. The plastic strap dangled, half melted, on one side like it had been burned through. "This isn't random," Harris said out loud, not a theory, a statement. There were patterns forming, lines being drawn in black plastic and Polaroid ink, and they were all pointing the same way. He stood up, wiped his hand on his pants, and grabbed the radio clipped to his chest. "Dispatch, this is Unit 43. Go ahead. Confirm backup ETA to Warehouse 19. 10 minutes tops. They're on their way." Harris hesitated. "Send a second unit to my location. We've got a DB. Male, approx. 35. Possible foul play." "Copy that. Need medical?" "No, he's cold." There was a pause on the other end. "Understood. Second unit en route." He clipped the radio back in place and looked around. The woods were quiet, like they were holding their breath. Bandit didn't move. He just sat there beside the body like a statue, eyes scanning the darkness. Not afraid, not even tense. Just ready. Harris exhaled slowly. "All right," he said, voice low. "Looks like someone's laying breadcrumbs." He looked at the cut zip tie again, then at Bandit. "Question is, are we meant to follow him or fall into the trap?" Minutes passed. The backup unit finally arrived, young officer named Daniels, and his rookie partner. They brought floodlights and a camera, started logging the scene. Daniels whistled softly when he saw the body. "Hell of a shift to go out on, huh?" Harris didn't answer. He handed off the security badge and stepped back. His mind was elsewhere. Back in the car, back to the photo, his wife's smile, that stranger's arm, and Bobby Sullivan, 20 years lost, handing him that same image with terror in his eyes. He felt something stir in his gut. Not fear, not yet, but something colder. Resolve. Because whoever was behind this wasn't done, and neither was he. The train's whistle didn't just cut through the night. It split it open, 3 short blasts. Long, short, 11:47. Exactly the time the manifest train from Philadelphia barreled through the Wilmington freight corridor, never stopping, never slowing. Officer Harris's boots skidded in the mud as he bolted back up the embankment, the old toolbox still thudding against his hip. Behind him, Bandit raced ahead, his paws splashing through puddles, mouth slightly open, tongue curled, from the run. The shepherd was running hard, too hard for a dog with his ear, but he didn't hesitate, and neither did Harris. They were already too far from the scene. The warehouse, the corpse in the woods, the backup officers, all behind them now. But something Bandit had picked up along the tracks had stopped him cold earlier, right where Bobby Sullivan had first been found. That's when Harris had heard it too. Not the rumble, not yet. It was Bandit. He'd gone rigid, ears forward. Eyes locked down the rail line. Then the low growl, the one that came from his gut, not his throat. The one he only used when something wasn't just wrong. It was still happening, and then came the sound, like thunder rolling uphill, the kind of sound that hit your bones first and then your ears. The train, and Bandit was already moving. They broke through the brush and hit the railbed fast. There, on the far side of the track, was a man. Another one, flat on his back, arms spread like a crucifix. His body half-twisted, legs over one side of the gravel, head tilted just wrong. Harris didn't stop to process, he just moved. "Go!" he shouted. "Bandit, hold his side." Bandit veered left, teeth clamping onto the man's jacket collar, like a vice. Harris dropped the toolbox and dropped to his knees, grabbing under the arms. The man was limp, dead weight. But unlike Bobby Sullivan, this one was completely unconscious, not trying to move, not making a sound. And the train was closing in. The rail beneath them shook like a living thing. The headlight had crested the bend. Now the beam stretched over them like judgment, cold and bright and fast. Harris's heart jackhammered in his chest as he pulled, once, twice, nothing. "Come on, damn it, move!" Bandit tugged with everything he had, paws skidding against the wet gravel. The man's body shifted, 6 inches at most. It wasn't enough. The train was screaming now. Close. Too close. Harris threw one arm under the man's chest, the other gripping the belt loop of his jeans, and heaved. His knees buckled, his spine lit with pain. But they moved, All three of them tumbled backward off the track and rolled down the far embankment, into the tall grass just as the train roared past. It hit like a windstorm. The blast of speed and steel and thunder as 70 cars of cargo blurred by just inches from where they'd been. The ground vibrated with violence. The grass flattened in waves. Harris lay flat on his back, panting, blinking up at the clouds, rain falling into his eyes. Beside him, Bandit stood, tail low, body trembling from effort but standing, and at his feet, the man they'd just pulled. From death, alive. Barely. The train screeched on into the night, trailing noise like a comet. Harris pushed himself upright, shaking. Jesus, he muttered. That's twice tonight. He leaned over the man, checked for breath, still shallow, still here. But that wasn't what made him stop. It was the man's arms, zip-tied, behind his back. Just like Bobby. The plastic strap was still tight, digging deep into the skin. This time, not cut, not frayed, just tight, intentional. And then Harris saw it, taped to the man's chest, tucked under his hoodie, another Polaroid. Harris ripped the tape loose and brought the flashlight close. This one was worse. It was his wife again, smiling on the beach, hair windblown, and next to her, him, Harris himself, but younger, laughing. He didn't remember this photo being taken. Ever. He stared at the picture, something cold unfurling in his gut like a shadow stretching in moonlight. His wife had died in a car crash. That was what the report said. That's what he told himself every night for the past 8 years. But these Polaroids, they weren't memories. They were messages. Someone wanted him to know something, and they were willing to use bodies to send it. Behind him, Bandit whined, low, unsettled. Not because of the man, not because of the train. He was looking down the track, the way the train had come from. Harris turned. A silhouette stood there, just beyond the reach of the flashlight beam. Still, watching, and then it was gone, swallowed by the dark. There's a line canine handlers never cross, a line between command and dependence. Tonight, that line didn't just blur. It shattered. Rainwater streamed off Harris's cap as he crouched beside the unconscious man they'd pulled from the tracks. The man's chest rose in stuttered rhythms, barely clinging to breath. His wrists were still bound tightly behind his back with the same black zip ties. Whoever left him here hadn't planned on him surviving. They'd timed it with the train, but they hadn't counted on Bandit. Stay with him, Harris muttered, reaching for his radio. Dispatch, this is Unit 43. I've got another one, alive. Male, late 20s to early 30s, same zip tie pattern. We're down past mile marker 187, just off the South Bend. Need medical. Fast. Copy that, Unit 43. Medics en route. ETA 12 minutes. 12 minutes felt like 12 years when someone's life was hanging by a thread. Harris glanced down at Bandit. The dog hadn't taken his eyes off the shadows beyond the rail line, the same spot where Harris had seen that figure standing just minutes ago. Did you see him too? Harris whispered. Bandit gave a short huff, low in his throat. Not a bark. A confirmation. Someone was watching. Had been watching. This wasn't random. It wasn't desperate. This was designed, and now it was personal. Harris moved to reposition the man so he wouldn't choke if he vomited. As he did, his fingers brushed something cold under the hoodie. Another photo? No. This time it was a flash drive, sealed in a Ziploc, taped to the inside lining. He slipped it into his pocket just as the man groaned. He was waking up. Harris leaned in. Hey, buddy, you with me? What's your name? The man coughed, sputtering. His eyes fluttered, open, glassy, and unfocused. Did he send you? He rasped. Harris froze. Who? But the man's eyes rolled back and he slipped under again. The medic unit hadn't arrived yet and the woods were starting to feel smaller, quieter, too quiet. Bandit circled once, then sat beside the victim, pressing close like a guardian. Harris couldn't help but notice how his partner leaned in, not out of duty but instinct, empathy even. 24 confirmed searches, 8 life saves, countless moments of trust. Bandit had never hesitated. Not once. And tonight, neither had he. Harris knelt beside him, scratched behind the ear. "You're not just a good dog," he murmured. "You're the best damn partner I've ever had." Bandit nuzzled his hand briefly, then looked back toward the tree line. His body tensed again. "Another presence? Bandit?" Harris asked low. The shepherd stood slowly, sniffed the air, then he barked. Once. Not alarm, not fear. Discovery. Without waiting, Bandit took off into the brush again. Son of a... Harris grabbed the flashlight and followed. He didn't shout. He trusted Bandit knew better. They moved through the wet trees, flashlight beam bouncing, boots sliding in mud. Harris felt every year in his knees, every pound in his chest, but he pressed on. He found Bandit stopped near a low embankment. The shepherd was sniffing something caught in a bramble patch, another jacket tattered and half buried. But it wasn't the jacket that mattered. It was what was inside it. Bandit pulled it loose gently with his teeth, revealing another object, a key card, partially wrapped in duct tape. It read, "McKinley Freight, Level 3. Access Harris's gut twisted McKinley again. This was no coincidence. This was a trail, a deliberate one, like someone wanted him to keep going, and made sure the dog would lead him. As Harris bagged the key card, in an evidence pouch, a branch snapped in the distance. His head snapped up. "Who's there?" Silence. Only the soft hiss of rain against leaves, then another snap, closer. Harris reached for his holster. Bandit stood stiff beside him, teeth bared, a low rumble growing in his chest. But just before Harris could draw, something dropped at his feet. He jerked backward, flashlight darting down. It was a Polaroid, no note, no tape, just left, like a calling card. He picked it up slowly. This one was taken from behind. A photo of Harris and Bandit, standing outside the precinct, taken through a car window. Same angle, same time of night. Recent, very recent. He looked toward the trees, heart racing. Whoever was behind this wasn't just playing games, they were watching him up close. And they knew everything about him, including Bandit. Sirens pierced the stillness, distant but approaching fast. Medical backup. For the man. For now. But Harris didn't feel like he was closer to answers. If anything, he was being pulled deeper into something he didn't understand, something tied to his wife. To the past. To a dog, who kept sniffing out ghosts in the rain. He and Bandit walked back slowly to the tracks. The shepherd brushed against his leg the way he always did after a job. But this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. By the time the medics loaded the unconscious man into the ambulance, the rain had turned into a slow, steady drizzle, more like a whisper than a storm. Harris stood at the edge of the tracks, soaked to the bone, fingers clenched around that last Polaroid like it might tear open answers if he held it tight enough. The flash from the paramedics' portable lights lit up, the woods in pulses behind him. Each flicker reminded him how close they'd come. Again. Bandit sat by his side, quiet now, eyes focused on the direction the stranger had vanished into. But his ears stayed alert, rotating like radar dishes, waiting for the next shift in. The air. They were both waiting, not for a call, not even for backup. They were waiting for the past to finally say what it came here to say. Back in the cruiser, Harris laid the Polaroid out on the center console. It was too crisp, too new. The shot had been taken from the passenger side of a car, angled between the side mirror and the cracked window. He and Bandit stood in front of the Wilmington precinct, barely 10 feet away in the frame. Neither of them was looking at the camera, which meant whoever took it was watching, and close. He rubbed his jaw, the night's adrenaline still buzzing under his skin. Someone had been planning this. Every zip tie, every photograph, every body left like a breadcrumb. And the kicker? It all circled back to McKinley Freight. The place his wife used to hate working for, and the place where all the current bodies were pointing. He pulled the flash drive from his pocket, still sealed in its bag. He wasn't tech-savvy, but he knew better than to plug something like that into his work computer. He glanced over at Bandit. "Let's take a ride." They pulled into a 24-hour gas station off Route 92, the kind with flickering LED signs and a few beat-up gaming machines in the back corner of the mini-mart. Harris nodded to the night clerk, a bored college kid half asleep behind the counter, and dropped a wrinkled 5 into the machine labeled Internet Access, 2:15 minutes. The terminal booted slow. Ancient, but it worked. He plugged in the drive. A single folder popped up. Willow 15. Clicked it open. There were 3 files. One was a PDF marked Intake, another a blurry JPG of what looked like a lab room, and the third, a video. He opened the PDF first. It was some sort of intake log, dated 11 years ago. It listed a name, Rachel Harris, age, 38, employment, McKinley Freight, status, witness next to it, disposition, removed, resettled, cause of death, staged, vehicular fatality. Completed. Harris stared at the screen, heart frozen mid-beat. Removed? Staged? He clicked the image file next. It was grainy, poorly lit. A medical room, maybe. Restraints. A table. In the back corner, a blurry shape of a woman curled into herself under a fluorescent bulb. Even at that resolution, even with her hair longer, he knew it was her Rachel alive. He clicked the video file last, no sound, just security footage. A man in a McKinley Freight uniform entered the room, set something down, looked directly at the camera, covered it with tape. The video cut out. Harris's hands shook. For 8 years he'd mourned his wife. He'd held a closed casket, signed off on death certificates. He remembered identifying the car, or what was left of it, wrapped around a tree out on Willow Street, mangled and scorched beyond recognition. They told him the fire made DNA confirmation impossible, but the purse, the license, they said it was enough. He swallowed hard. Jesus, Rachel, what did they do to you? Back in the cruiser, Bandit was restless. The shepherd paced in the back seat, nose twitching toward the cracked rear window. Harris climbed in and sat for a moment thinking, trying to make the pieces fit. The zip ties, the missing men, the photos, the freight keycard. And now, a folder claiming his wife's death was faked. Bandit let out a sharp huff, then turned and barked. Once, twice, low and short. Harris turned to look. Down the road, across the parking lot, under the glare of the gas station lights. A car sat, parked near the dumpsters, windows tinted dark, engine off, but Harris saw it just for a second. The flash of a camera lens, retracting. Click. They'd been followed again. He started the engine. Bandit was already alert, ears pinned, body leaning forward. They weren't waiting anymore, not for permission, not for backup, and not for time to run out. Whatever anomaly they were chasing, it wasn't just about the past. It was happening now. And Harris knew exactly where he was, headed next. McKinley Freight looked like it always had, dead on the outside but too quiet to be abandoned. Harris pulled the cruiser into a narrow alley behind the building, cutting the headlights. He didn't want to announce his arrival. Not tonight. Bandit stood on the back seat, nose pressed to the window, breathing fog into the glass. The shepherd's body was rigid, not from fear, but alertness. He knew they weren't just pulling someone over or chasing a lead. This was something else. This was closure, or maybe payback. Harris stepped out slowly, flashlight clipped to his chest, right hand resting near the grip of his sidearm. He approached the side door, the one labeled Authorized Personnel Only. It was dented and weather-stained. A keypad lock blinked. Red. He pulled the keycard from his jacket, the one Bandit had sniffed out. He tapped it once. Green light. Click. The door opened with a tired squeak. Inside, it smelled like motor oil and mildew. The overhead lights flickered to life reluctantly, one by one. Rows of pallets stretched down long concrete corridors, shrink-wrapped in silence. But it wasn't just a warehouse. Not anymore. The office space in the back had been converted. Harris could see traces of something else. Heavy-duty locks, reinforced doors, and security cameras that didn't blink. This was more than logistics. It felt like containment. Bandit stayed close, tail stiff, ears rotating like antennae. Every footstep echoed, then came a sound, faint from the far hallway, a shuffle, then a thud. Harris drew his weapon, kept it low. "Show yourself." Silence. He moved forward, carefully, one foot over the other. Bandit followed without hesitation, teeth just barely bared. They turned a corner and entered what looked like a break room, or what used to be one. Now it was empty, except for the man slumped in the corner, wrists zip-tied behind his back, mouth taped shut, blood smeared across one temple. Harris rushed over, crouched low. The man's eyes fluttered, open, glassy, faded, but familiar. "Wait," Harris muttered. He leaned closer, lifted the man's chin. Scars. Gray in the beard. Half a tooth missing. But the eyes. Those eyes belonged to someone from long ago. From the neighborhood back in Jersey. "Bobby?" Harris whispered. "Bobby Sullivan?" The man blinked, recognition flickering behind years of trauma. It was him. Bobby had vanished without a trace 20 years ago, just disappeared off the block one summer night. Some said he ran away. Some whispered about gangs. But no one ever found a body. Not until now, not until Bandit. Harris ripped the tape from his mouth. "Bobby, it's me, Ray Harris." The man coughed, weak and hoarse. "You remembered. How the hell are you here? What happened?" Bobby's voice cracked as he spoke. "It wasn't just your wife, it's bigger. They used people, employees, kids, experiments, blackmail. McKinley wasn't shipping freight, they were moving people." Harris stared. The puzzle pieces weren't just clicking, they were detonating. "You're telling me they faked Rachel's death because she found out?" Bobby nodded, trembling. "She was trying to expose them. They knew she wouldn't stop. So they made it look like she died. They told me I'd be next. So I kept quiet. For 20 years. A shiver ran through Harris's spine. "What about this?" He pulled out the most recent Polaroid. Bobby stared at it, jaw shaking. "That man in the background. He's still running things. You know him too." Harris frowned. "What man?" Bobby swallowed. "He went by a different name back then. But in the old neighborhood, he was your Little League coach." A pause. Then Harris's stomach dropped. "Coach Sullivan?" "No, his brother, Jonathan. Jonathan Sullivan. The quiet one. The guy who always worked behind the scenes. The one who ran that old shipping company before it suddenly merged and disappeared. The one who used to bring weird cameras to the park. The one who was supposed to be dead." Suddenly, a bang echoed through the far end of the hallway, metal slamming against metal. Harris spun, weapon up, Bandit snarled, body coiled. Another bang, this time closer. Footsteps, fast, multiple. "Bobby, stay down," Harris snapped. Bandit took the lead, sprinting toward the noise. Harris followed. They rounded the corner, just in time to see 3 figures retreating through a side exit. One turned back, aiming a flashlight straight into Harris's eyes. The flash flared. Then they were gone. Outside, tires screeched. A black SUV tore across the loading dock and vanished into the night. Harris stood frozen, heart pounding. He didn't see their faces, but he didn't need to. They left something else behind, taped to the side door. Another Polaroid, this one of Bandit. Alone, in a cage. Underneath it, written in red ink. "Next time, we take him." Back inside the freight building, the lights flickered like the place was trying to forget it ever held a secret. But Bobby couldn't forget. Not anymore. He sat slumped against the wall in the corner of the break room, bandaged and still pale, but finally calm enough to speak. Bandit lay beside him, a silent sentinel, ears twitching every few seconds. He hadn't taken his eyes off the exit since the SUV tore out of the lot. Harris stood nearby, pacing. "Why now, Bobby?" he asked. "Why tonight? Why drag all this back up?" Bobby didn't look up. He just reached into his coat, the one the EMTs hadn't checked because of the blood and broken zipper, and pulled out something small, folded and worn. A photo. Another Polaroid. But this one was different. Old. Faded. Bent at the corners like it had lived in fear. He held it out with shaky hands. "I was saving this," Bobby said. "For you." Harris took it slowly. No gloves. No hesitation. When he flipped it over, his breath caught in his throat. It was Rachel, his wife. Laughing, wearing the same sweater she had on the night of her supposed accident. But she wasn't in a car. She wasn't alone. She was inside this very warehouse. Harris could see the blue paint on the cinder block wall, the chipped tile floor, even the red emergency exit sign in the background that still buzzed overhead. But that wasn't what froze him. It was the man standing next to her, smiling, his hand wrapped tightly around her shoulder. Jonathan Sullivan. Older, balding, but unmistakable. He wasn't just close to her. He was comfortable, like they knew each other, like they'd been something. Harris stared at the photo for a long moment, barely breathing. Bobby shifted uncomfortably. That was taken the night before they staged the crash. "You're sure?" "I watched him put her in the car," Bobby said quietly. "She didn't fight him, didn't scream, just went along. I thought it was part of the plan. I thought she was undercover. But later, when they said she died, I realized I didn't know anything anymore." Harris sat down hard on a crate. The truth he'd carried for 8 years cracked open like a rotten egg. He hadn't just lost his wife. He'd lost the story, the narrative he told himself about who she was, who they were. Had she betrayed him? Had she been taken? Or had she chosen this? He looked at the photo again. The moment was frozen forever. The smile, the lean of her body toward the man. Not fear, not panic. Comfort. Bandit let out a soft whine. Harris looked up. The dog was on his feet. Again, posture alert, but not fearful. He was looking at the wall. No, at the wall behind the wall, a panel, a supply cabinet with scratches near the bottom, too low for any human to reach, but just right for a dog's paws. Bandit pawed it once. Harris stepped over and opened it. Inside was a plastic file box, locked. But not well. He broke the clasp with his flashlight and opened the lid. Inside were folders, dozens of them. Paper records, photos, notes, medical files, people, men, women, teens, names he didn't recognize, and a few he did, and in the back, a photo album. The cover was worn red leather. Inside, dozens of Polaroids, each neatly labeled with a name and date. And in the final sleeve? Rachel, again. This time alone, sitting on a cot in a concrete room, looking directly at the camera. Eyes hollow. Expression blank. No Jonathan, no smile, just silence. Bobby leaned over his shoulder. "They didn't kill her," he whispered, "but they broke her." Harris felt the weight of it all settle into his bones. This wasn't just about one woman. It wasn't even about him. It was about Bandit's nose sniffing out the holes in a lie big enough to bury whole people. And now they had names, faces, dates, evidence, and someone was going to pay. Sirens echoed in the distance. Daniels and the other officers would be here soon. Harris would turn over the files, the flash drives, the photographs. But in that moment, standing under the hum of the exit light, Harris realized something else. Bandit had never stopped working, even on his last shift, even after the train, even through the rain and the blood and the ghosts. He'd stayed focused, trusting, true. And thanks to him, Rachel's death, fake or not, wouldn't be the end of the story. It would be the start of something else. Outside, the first squad car pulled in. Harris pocketed the Polaroid. Bandit stood beside him, tail still and steady. And Bobby? Bobby just looked relieved, like he'd been holding his breath for 20 years and could finally exhale. Thank you for following this story all the way to this moment. We hope you felt the weight of loyalty, truth, and memory in every chapter. But let me ask you, if you found a photograph that rewrote everything you believed about someone you loved, would you chase the truth or let the past stay buried? Let us know in the comments. We'll see you in the next chapter.